Hey guys, we're back. Episode 13 of We Are Judging You. So many things have happened during this last week or 2 weeks since we did our last episode. So I'm George Edwards. I'm here with my very, very, very lucky to be here host, Murtaza and Ramadan Mubarak, friends everywhere. You know, we're still in the midst of Ramadan until March 20th?
Yeah.
Till March 20th. Ramadan is going on. I'll be eating, but I know many of you won't. And us Christians, you know, observe the holiday in solidarity with our Muslim brothers and sisters.
That, yeah.
So, but getting to the events of this week, the governor's race just happened, and I didn't even know Governor Abbott even had an opponent. I mean, he's larger than life in the. Who would dare waste their time? But he won, right?
He did. I think a pretty overwhelming. I think he had 81%, slightly lower than what Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick had in his primary race. I think he had 84% or so. But yeah, Greg Abbott is the presumptive nominee for the GOP going into November. He's running against Gina Hinojosa, who's a Texas legislator. She won on the Democratic side outright, which is good. Can sort of focus on the November election. So as you know, in Texas, in our primary system, it's not a closed primary just yet, but you got to pick which party you're in for. And then if a candidate gets more than 50% in the primary election, they go off to the general election against the Democratic and other parties' nominees. In this race, pretty interesting. There was a lot of shifts, a lot of interesting sort of results happened, and we're going to talk about the Senate race, which has the most implication in a second. But there were some big implications. So there is going to be a primary in late May, primary runoff, to make a decision. Yeah, May 26th. So we're going to be having to see a lot of political ads between now and May.
$100 million worth.
At least in one race, it may be several $100 million combined across the state. There's also going to be and primary season in Texas also brings out a lot of the craziness and a lot of the absurd headlines. So I think between now and then, it's going to be fun times.
Yeah. So what are you thinking about? I mean, we can go down race by race. You know, the next one on our list is Steve Toth and Dan Crenshaw. You know, just a race that, you know, who won that and why did they win that? I mean, I don't know. It's a major upset, apparently. You know?
Yeah, so incumbent Dan Crenshaw, who was a former a veteran, he lost his eye. He was a disabled there, and I think that was the patch was his sort of trademark. I think he had got a lot of antipathy from the conservative base. They felt that he wasn't conservative enough or true to the
Trumper,
to the MAGA. I don't know if he was supporting DeSantis
Trumper,
in the last
that's
one.
his problem.
But I think part of this election has been on the GOP side punishing people who are not seen to be sufficiently or truly Trump supporters, part of the MAGA movement. I think that's what's going on.
So he's not MAGA.
He is, but I don't think he's MAGA enough. I think that was a complaint. So Steve Toth was
MAGA.
Former representative from state representative. Well, not former. He's the current one from Montgomery County. Steve Toth knows the grassroots. I've met him a few times in Austin. Very nice guy, very civil. But yeah, he's a true believer. Nobody is doubting Steve Toth when it comes to MAGA support.
Did he have the president's endorsement?
That is a good question. I think he did in the end. Trump sort of in the Texas races sort of got involved in some and didn't get involved in some. I don't know if he picked in that one. I know for my Congressional District, Texas 38, he did pick. He wanted John Bonk was his, and that's the one who ultimately won. But yeah, that is a good question. I don't know if he got involved in every single race, especially because last month there was that special election and the person he was supporting had an upset. So I think he was just thinking, let me just get in where I know that, I'm going to be with the winner, right? Kind of thing. But yeah, it is showing that the grassroots is thinking in Texas, this is their time. They've become more emboldened. They're pushing people. Everyone has, again, in primary, everyone does push rightward. But in this one, I think the true right candidate has won in every election. But that gets us to the next one, which is the Senate race. And so, George, what are your thoughts on the Senate race and what you thought the outcomes were?
Well, Ken Paxton, John Cornyn, and Wesley Hunt. here's a lineup. It's like WWE Monday Night Raw. Who's gonna win? I mean, this was kind of epic. I mean, it was like the British Bulldog versus like the Ultimate Warrior. So, and those of you who are wrestling fans know exactly who I'm talking about. Just two behemoths going at each other, and then you've got a third guy, also pretty well known, but new, kind of new to the GOP game. Has the president's endorsement. Kind of on several other things, at least when he was running for Congress. You got Wesley Hunt, and he got like 13%. So the real question is who is going to pick up the phone and court Wesley Hunt to get his 13%? Because it was so close between Cornyn and Paxton. I mean, like 41 to 42% or something like that. It was so close.
40 and 41, yeah.
But I also heard that, and I haven't verified, my PIA request is still pending from the government office on actual expenditures, but over $100 million spent on behalf of Senator Cornyn, to maybe a few million, $5 million on behalf of Paxton. So that's a huge mismatch in spending. But then the real question is the Senate is another ball game. Like, you're beyond, you're part of Congress, but senators are regarded as almost like potential presidents, would-be presidents. Like, if you become a senator, you're not just a rank and file House of Representatives member. You're, and I think there, maybe 435-ish House of Representatives, and it's only 50 senators. So it's a very, very high office to achieve. Like, the president has to come talk to you about his appointments. His appointments have to be approved with the advice and consent of the Senate. And typically the vice president of the United States ends up being the president of the Senate. So it's like there's only one step above being a senator, and that's really being a president, where you have a lot more power. However, that office is limited to 4 years. Being a senator, that's 6 years. So it's like I think the senators are really the Emperor Palpatines of the empire. So of the American empire, the president will change, but senators change much less frequently.
Right.
So Cornyn has a solid background. I think he was a Texas Supreme Court justice. He may have even been AG.
He was before
so he was
Ken
AG.
Paxton, right.
And so. I think he's well qualified to do the job. But the real question in my mind is Texas ready to finally get back to its blue grassroots? Could it be that we get a blue senator? There was a huge election on the other side with James Talarico and Jasmine Crockett. Mm-hmm. And there was a ton of money spent in that one too. Talarico comes on top. But Crockett is sort of the soul of the Democrats, right? But it's important, and I think Talarico he expressed more that, no, we don't like everything the president's doing, but our platform isn't just anti what the president's doing. Like, we have our own platform. Like, if you just walk around saying F the president all the time, you're going to have people in your own party who aren't going to be able to get anything done because they have to work with people in the other party.
Right.
And right now, love it or hate it, the president is the kingmaker of the red party. And that, I don't think, is changing in the short term, maybe not the long term. It could be his son or, his son-in-law that come after him. I mean, this could be a dynasty that we're witnessing on the red side. But on the blue side, Texas is like, there were more people who voted in this primary than ever.
Of course.
Than ever. And actually, our very, very learned marketing manager, Lee Yin, corrected me on this. I thought it was during the Obama years that was the highest. It was only like 900,000, and she walked in and said, "No, here's the statistic. It's over 1 million people were in this primary." So she got me on that one. So insert a cheer here.
No, that was a good catch. Yeah, and and everyone's been watching. It's been interesting to see all the sort of passion. Even people who were sometimes dialed out and sort of sickened by everything going on in the world. They dialed into this primary. I think just 2 cents, and then I know we need to shift to foreign policy. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Talarico won outright, so he's now going into November pretty strong. He doesn't have to worry about a runoff. And I think Paxton and Cornyn are going to beat each other up for about 2 months.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of material.
And there's
on
a lot
Paxton.
of money. The establishment. So Cornyn represents the establishment, and Paxton represents the right wing. The grassroots.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting. The establishment has vowed to spend all the money they have on their last hurrah. Hopefully, or maybe, and I think Paxton in runoffs is because the runoff becomes much more geared to the true believers, the grassroots voters who are not going to miss. I remember a few years back, one of our buddies was running, and I literally, for my entire precinct, was the only one who had voted that day. I was like, I felt so powerful as, the decider.
Yeah.
So, turnout's going to be a lot less. People are going to be fatigued. Paxton was my boss, full disclosure, worked with him closely. I know who I'm counting on, but it's going to be, time will tell. There may be some more developments. Trump this morning vowed to intercede in such a way in this race and try to get one person to quit the race.
Which leads me to a question I have for you.
Yeah.
If the president comes in and says, "Hey, guy X, you're not my pick for this one. Wait for the next one. You need to exit." Should X go ahead and do that, or should there be some resistance within the force?
I mean, I think publicly, anyone who sort of resists the president too loudly usually gets shot down. Whether it's Iran or whether it's a political, like look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, right?
Right.
So I think whenever
But don't worry, Dubai is safe.
Yeah, it's like in The Godfather, it's like you're gonna get a call you can't refuse, right? And if it's coming from the president, yes, you got to be very mindful. But I think there can be some, backroom, negotiations on what it means if I drop out. Again, assuming the president's going to do that. He said this morning on Truth that he would do that. But let's see what he does and who he thinks he wants to pick. The thing is that if he gets Paxton, that's a very reliable ally you have in the Senate, right? Somebody who's 99.99, if not 100%, going to support the president's agenda. Cornyn was imploring Trump not to run. He was saying, I think the party has moved on in the last election and was sort of trying to shift who the thing was. So let's see. Cornyn obviously is respected. I've met him also.
But Cornyn hasn't been the subject of all these investigations.
Yeah, but I mean,
all these allegations, and I think even now one of the candidates is in proceedings with a soon-to-be ex-spouse. So that's going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, look, if anyone can handle these allegations, I think it's been Paxton. He's done a masterful job in doing it. So I think we're not in the 1980s when that whole scandal happened with plagiarism. Biden was accused of plagiarism and Hart was having an affair and all this kind of stuff. We moved on. I think the Clinton years has immunized all of us to presidential scandals. I think unless it's like, and
now we have the Epstein files, which could be the largest presidential scandal. I mean, even bigger than Watergate.
Right.
So very interesting how the war started, right?
Right.
When Epstein got hot. There's not much to say on that.
Clinton had his deposition.
Circles.
Clinton had his deposition. I was watching clips of Hillary Clinton. She was impressive, but she didn't want to answer anything.
She shut it down.
Yeah, she was very angry.
She shut it down. She is and apologies to former Secretary of State Clinton if you're watching this, but I think she is a Scorpio. And former President Bill Clinton is a Leo, like moi. And I'm telling you, the Scorpios will shut it down.
I mean, what is that? The country singer who's like, you want, like Joe, you want the women in your corner, right? Like that. I mean, Hillary Clinton across the board. I mean, her man can do no wrong. Her man can do no wrong.
Who's more qualified to be president of the United States than Hillary Clinton? I mean, absolutely nobody. Like, I'm not even going to say that, with all of his accolades, even President Obama didn't have all of the experience that
Right.
Hillary did. And Hillary was in along with Bill for his 8-year ride. So she was like totally on the inside. So yeah, that would have been like a majestic, sort of a 16-year Clinton presidency. But
Right.
could we be getting that with Trump now?
I mean, it'll be interesting to see.
You
I mean,
know?
I think the question is, do his children want to go down that pathway? Because, right now they've been involved in the business ventures, and my understanding is, there's a lot of breaks, but yeah, I mean it is. And the question is there going to be Trump fatigue? I don't think they want their brand to lose an election because that also hurts. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Okay, so let's switch to Iran conflict, another
Yeah.
topic. We have a few minutes.
Look,
Yeah.
regime change was something that, there were a lot of promises made during the presidential debates about starting wars and changing regimes and things like that. But guys, this is something that the American government has been involved with all over the world for a very, very long time now. And I am definitely, because of my civil rights work, I'm very sensitive to the abuse that government has, that government can inflict on the citizenry, because it has this immense power. If you ask me, there's a fourth branch of government. There's the legislative, executive, judicial, and then you've got law enforcement. Law enforcement is a whole other branch of government, if you ask me now. That's sort of not written in the Constitution. But the CIA, all of those executive agencies that are run by the executive, they have access to a lot of data that we simply don't. Okay? And we've come used to, we're used to our iPhones, our iPads, our technology. We're used to getting things for, somewhat reasonable prices. There could be things going on. Long story short, I'm not automatically against our government for intervening in a foreign territory if it believes legitimately that protects American interests. Because at the end of the day, there are governments all over the world that are very, very hostile to our way of life, that want it to end immediately. And obviously that's not something that we want. But, I tend to think that, it serves any country well to have a good working relationship with America, no matter where you are. And I know there's probably political reasons, security reasons, all kinds of reasons why the incursion into Iran started. But it's definitely something. It could be something deeper than people say America will be a puppet to Israel. America's a puppet to Israel. That is very surface stuff for me. I think that there is a tangible benefit to American interests to have a regime over there that is not as fundamentalist as what we're seeing. Okay.
No, I mean, look, my libertarian background is, intervening in these things. I mean, it needs to be done. I mean, I think, right, Representative Massey, sort of leading the Libertarian Front, was one of the ones who pushed for the War Powers Resolution, which failed yesterday. But basically just, at least in the Senate, it failed. But basically just saying that, look, going to war should be treated as a very big issue under the Constitution, right? That there's a process, that Congress should authorize this, that there should be clear evidence, that that means you have hearings and whatever you need to, and the executive acts on what Congress. Unfortunately, the last 70 years, that's not been the case. The
president will ignore the War Powers Act.
Well, the president doesn't need to act unless there's a War Powers Resolution, right?
Right.
As I was learning yesterday. But you file you go ahead and take an action because there's an immediate threat, and then you come back, to Congress and make that, that discussion. Iran was going to happen. I mean, just the rhetoric that had been going on. Prime Minister of Israel has said, vowed for 30 years that Israel is the number one enemy Iran is the number one enemy of Israel. They want to wipe him off. Yeah, and I think Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran, who was killed in the strikes a few days ago, he had said that he wanted to wipe Israel off the map, which was famously remembered. So I mean, I get it.
Israel is kind of America's really only friend there, and that region. So you've got Saudi Arabia, but there's so much.
I think that's wrong. I think the countries in the Middle East, and I think a lot of the Muslim countries, are beholden to America and the West, right?
Yeah.
I think this whole narrative of Israel being the only friend is wrong. Yes, Iran was definitely not a friend in the last 47 years, right? Since the Shah got taken over. Back in the day, they used to be, right? But I think in recent history, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, I mean, Kuwait, they depend on U.S. military bases to protect them. So by no means are they not friends of the United States. I think the 56 countries in the Middle East, with the exception of Iran, sometimes Yemen, sometimes Lebanon, they are all pretty much beholden to the West, right? I mean, I think they've been created in one sense.
Do they like that though?
I think I don't know about
that's the question. I mean, it's almost like you're describing a vassal state, but does the vassal state really want to be a vassal?
Yeah, but then
the
that's
question.
well, that is true. I mean, I don't know if all the people in those countries are supportive, but the governments are definitely put in place and maintained only by how close they are to the U.S. And like it happened in Pakistan, right, where Imran Khan was seen as being sort of getting off of script, and Biden administration said take him out, and they did, and they've taken him out to such a point that he's dying in jail with like losing his eyesight, right? So I think the Muslim countries know, and I think that unfortunately is one of the reasons why a lot of the people in those countries don't like American intervention, because it has yielded corruption, bad leaders, and governments which have not developed the resources that are there. I mean, like going back to Pakistan has some of the most resources in the world untouched, untapped for the benefit of the population, because the government takes most of it, or the military. So I think that's part of it, that America, they talk about democracy, but they only want democracy in their own country. They're fine with dictators, and pretty bad dictators, in the rest of the world. And I think that hypocrisy does not help American interests. It does help American arms manufacturers and American military, in the military industrial complex that President Eisenhower used to talk about. I think they definitely benefit from endless wars. But it's interesting, the MAGA movement, they didn't want to get into forever wars. Marjorie Taylor Greene this week was like, we didn't elect somebody to fight wars on behalf of Israel. We elected somebody to take care of healthcare, the roads, all of these fundamental things. And I think this war, I mean, look at where the country is, right? Like, I honestly think we're in stagflation. We got inflation going on. We got, stagnant economy. Jobs are being lost every day for AI. So I think we're not in a great economic position to fight a war that might add trillions and trillions to debt. Our children are not going to have a future in this country unless something changes, right? And I don't think any American interest is served by
but
that.
Something tells me that Iran is not like, they're not the Axis powers. They're not the combination of a German military, Japanese military, and an Italian military together. Iran is something, I mean, they do have their, what is it, the hypersonic missiles. They do have that. But compared to everything else that the American military has, I don't know if they can sustain. Like, is this going to be another Russia-Ukraine situation? I don't think so.
I mean, look, Saddam Hussein was supposed to be a weaker army than the Iranian army is today, and armies like that are not going to fight a normal war going on battlefields, and eventually there's going to become guerrilla warfare. Overnight, America's arming the Kurds. There's some other ethnic groups.
That's right.
Iran is more homogenous than Iraq was, right? For the most part, you have Persians, you have small minorities. Kurds are trying to get involved, but the problem with Kurds is that they get betrayed every single time they get involved. They got betrayed in Iraq twice. They got betrayed in Syria just now. Turkey is a NATO ally, does not want a Kurdistan, a country for the Kurds, right? So depending on them, so what is George W. Bush's famous saying? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I mean, this is fool me 4 times. It is what it is. But that's going to be, I guess, the way that they're going to try to expand. Now, is that an excuse, just like in Vietnam, where Kennedy sent all of these military advisors, and then eventually America had a full-scale involvement in the war?
Iran is relying on Russia and China,
right,
mainly. Which, if they did join forces, that would be a formidable opponent for America.
Right.
However, Russia is still in the mud, literally, in Ukraine.
Of course.
They've lost so much artillery in Ukraine, and they thought Ukraine was going to be over in 30 days.
Right.
And here we are 3 years later, and they're still stuck in the mud in Ukraine. Russia has a lot of weaponry. They have a lot of artillery. China has the hypersonic missiles as well.
Everything. They got everything.
They got everything.
Hypersonic,
Right. They got everything. They got nuclear. However, the other day I was reading a news article where China's putting pressure on Iran to create a settlement with America to end the war. We're China's biggest client. We're their biggest customer. I don't think China is going to do anything to really dismantle or destroy the American empire because it destroys itself by doing so.
Right.
So that's kind of my take on that.
No, I think that's right. I think unless Russia, I agree with you. If Russia and China don't get involved in any ostensible way, I think Iran 4 weeks, 5 weeks will be destroyed. It'll be interesting to see if the next leadership says, "Look, we'll make peace."
Yeah.
Or I don't think the Shah is going to be reinstated there, but it is.
This is all about. It's just a regime change. That's it. That's really what it's all about. I don't think this is an attack on the people of Iran, on their beliefs, on their customs, their traditions, or their religion. It's just about the ideology that came out of some of the very top leaders, like the ones at the top, literally.
So let's just, as we close down that, let's quickly, if you think, so we're going to try to bring this into each of our podcasts now. It's just something about legal preparedness or legal questions that come up to us as lawyers. So let's just very quickly, during a global conflict, or when times are tense, what do you recommend, to our listeners in terms of their legal rights?
Number one thing, have your estate in order. Estate planning is winning. Planning is preparation. That way, if something happens to you, let's say America does get involved in a third world war and the draft is reinstituted and they're drafting, women and men this time for the war effort. You want your estate to be in order. Otherwise, the state decides what happens to all of your assets. So I would say, number one, have your estate plan fully in order. You can do it on your own. You can try to chat GPT it if you want, but I always recommend hire a qualified attorney to help you create your estate plan and to maintain it, because laws do change. So every 5-7 years, just look at it, do a checkup, and do updates.
Right.
If you need to do updates, your life may change. You may have additional children. You have to do updates to your estate plan. So I would say, number one, have your estate in order. Plan it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think the other thing is during a war, there are going to be a lot of noise that you hear. There's going to be propaganda from our enemies. All sorts of stuff is going to happen. You want to have a trusted source that you're getting information from. Just because you can get it online or you can get it from, social media doesn't mean it's correct. So I think it's important that, your trusted advisors, whether it's your lawyer, it's your accountant, it's your religious, clergy person, right? Your doctor, keep in touch with them. Try to minimize. Mental health is a big thing, right? And it affects people during this time because they're constantly being bombarded with the end of the world. So just find a safe space for yourself and do your planning. If you get involved in protest, and stuff like that, make sure you know your rights. Make sure you have your identification on you, right? So that way if anything happens, you're at least able to identify yourself, especially since in the last episodes we've been talking about ICE raids. Those have not ended, so you got to know your rights, and that's something that we definitely can help you with. George, you want to close it off?
My guess is all of these raids and the stuff that we're seeing in the news is going to end when the ideology at the top ends. So this could be a perfect time for deeply red states like my home state of Texas to become blue again, or at the very least more purple. So we're still judging you, America. This was episode 13, and God bless you. And God bless the United States.
And just remember, subscribe to our podcast on YouTube. We are judging you, and follow ESS Law Partners on all your social media, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and you can get more information.